No one expected it. In the middle of a roaring Trump rally, a quiet farmer's wife stepped forward, and within minutes she silenced thousands, including the president himself, Donald Trump. The atmosphere buzzed with energy. People were chanting his name, red hats dotted the crowd like sparks of fire, and patriotic music thundered from the speakers. Every word the president spoke was met with cheers and applause that shook the ground beneath their feet. But right in the middle of that electric chaos, something unexpected began to unfold. From the far end of the crowd, a woman began to move forward. She wasn't waving a flag or holding a sign. She wasn't shouting or trying to draw attention to herself. She just walked, steady, deliberate, almost as if she had made a decision she could no longer hold back. Her clothes told her story before she even spoke. She wore worn-out jeans, a simple plaid shirt, and boots covered in dust. Her hands were rough, her hair pulled back in a loose bun, the kind of woman who had known long days under the sun and quiet nights filled with worry and prayer. At first, no one paid her much attention. But then the people nearest her noticed. There was something about her, a calm, determined presence that made them move aside without even realizing why. The sea of people slowly parted, and as she walked closer to the stage, whispers began to ripple through the crowd. Security saw her coming and stepped forward cautiously, unsure of what she intended to do. But she didn't look angry or threatening. She just looked like someone with something important on her heart. President Trump, standing tall at the podium, noticed the movement too. His speech faltered slightly as he watched her approach. It was unusual. People didn't just walk up to the front like that during his rallies. The chants began to fade one by one. The music stopped. The noise of thousands quieted into an eerie silence. You could hear the wind, the rustling of flags, even the faint hum of the speakers still on standby. When she reached the edge of the stage, she lifted her eyes to meet the president's. Her voice trembled just a little, but her words carried clearly across the microphone. "Sir," she said, steadying herself, "I'm just a farmer's wife, but I have something to say." And in that instant, the entire crowd, tens of thousands of people, stood frozen, waiting for what would come next. The woman's name was Martha Jenkins, a farmer's wife from a small windswept town in the heart of Iowa. For most of her 52 years, she had lived the kind of life that rarely made headlines, quiet, honest, and filled with hard work. Every morning before dawn, she and her husband Dale rose to tend the fields. While the rest of the world was still asleep, they were out feeding the livestock, checking fences, or coaxing stubborn machinery back to life. Their hands bore the marks of labor, and their faces carried the quiet pride of people who had built their lives with sweat and faith. Martha had never seen herself as anyone special. She wasn't a politician or a business owner. She wasn't the kind of person who gave speeches or stood in front of a crowd. She was a wife, a mother of 3 grown children and a grandmother to 2 little ones who loved to chase chickens on the farm. Her life had always revolved around family, faith, and the land beneath her feet. But deep down, she carried a worry that never went away, a worry shared by many in towns like hers. That morning, as she watched the news and saw President Donald Trump was holding a rally nearby, something stirred inside her. She didn't plan it. She didn't write down any words, but she felt an ache in her heart, a need to speak for all the families who were quietly struggling while the rest of the world moved on. When the microphone was handed to her, the air seemed to change. The thousands gathered went still, sensing that this wasn't going to be just another comment or question. Martha's hands trembled slightly, but her eyes were steady. "Mr. President," she began, her voice soft but sure, "I came here today not to cheer, not to protest, but to tell you what life looks like for people like us. We wake up before the sun rises and we don't stop working until it's gone. We do it because we love this country, because it's our home. But lately," she paused, emotion catching in her throat. "Lately it feels like the harder we work, the further behind we fall." The crowd, usually loud and restless, was silent. Every word seemed to echo through the still air. Her voice wasn't powerful because it was loud. It was powerful because it was real. For once, politics faded into the background, and all that remained was the truth of an ordinary woman speaking from the heart. Martha's words painted a vivid picture, one that no camera, no speechwriter, and no politician could ever capture. Her voice trembled at first, but soon it steadied, carried by the weight of truth. She spoke of the long summers when the rain never came and the ground cracked beneath their feet, She talked about the cornfields that once promised abundance but now stood half-grown, dry and uncertain. The droughts come harder, the storms come stronger, she said, her gaze never leaving the president. And every year the prices go up, fertilizer, feed, diesel, but what we earn never does. The crowd listened, not just with their ears but with their hearts. People who had never set foot on a farm suddenly began to picture it. The endless rows of crops struggling against the heat, the barns in need of repair, the silent worry that crept in each night like a shadow. Martha's voice softened. Our local hospital closed 2 years ago, she continued, her eyes glistening. If someone gets hurt, we have to drive 2 hours just to see a doctor. We pray every day that nothing goes wrong because we can't afford for something to go wrong. Her words hung in the air like a prayer and a plea all at once.
She wasn't angry.
She was tired. The kind of tired that doesn't just come from work, but from years of doing everything right and still falling behind. My husband says he's too old to start over, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but too young to quit. Some nights I find him sitting at the kitchen table staring at the bills, wondering how we'll make it another season, and I stand there trying to be strong for him. But sometimes I wonder the same thing. The audience shifted uncomfortably. You could feel the emotion ripple through them like a wave. Farmers nodded in silent agreement. Mothers held their children closer, realizing that the struggle she described wasn't just hers. It belonged to countless families across the country. Even the loudest supporters, those who had come just to cheer and wave flags, were suddenly still. Then Martha lifted her head, her voice stronger now. Sir, she said to President Trump, I don't need promises. I need understanding. I don't need slogans. I need solutions. We love our country. We just want our country to love us back. And in that moment, the massive crowd, thousands of people, stood in total silence. No phones, no shouting, no movement. Just the sound of truth filling the air. President Trump stepped forward, visibly moved. The usual fire and bravado that defined his rallies seemed to fade for a moment. The crowd, sensing something different, went quiet again. Instead of his signature confidence and booming voice, there was a stillness, an unspoken respect between the president and the woman who had just laid bare the truth of so many hard-working Americans. Martha, he said slowly, gripping the sides of the podium, you remind me of why I started doing this. People like you, the ones who work hard, who build this country, who never ask for praise or credit. You are America's heart. There was a ripple of emotion through the audience. Many had tears in their eyes. Others clapped softly as if afraid to break the fragile moment that had settled over them. President Trump continued, his tone softer than usual. You know, we talk about success, about power, about politics, but we forget the real heroes. We forget the people who wake up every day and keep this country alive. The farmers who grow our food, the workers who build our homes, the families who pray together and believe in something bigger than themselves. He paused, scanning the sea of faces before him. Martha, you shouldn't have to beg for help. You shouldn't have to wonder if your hard work will pay off. You deserve respect, not pity. You deserve support, not silence. The crowd broke into thunderous applause, their cheers echoing across the open field. But Trump raised his hand, asking them to quiet down. No, he said firmly, let her words stay in this moment. Let's not forget what she just reminded us of. He turned back to Martha. You have my word, he said. I'll meet with farmers from your community. I'll listen to what's really happening. Not just the reports, not the headlines. Real voices. Real people. Whether you agreed with him politically or not, that moment transcended partisanship. It wasn't about red or blue. It was about real connection. For a brief, powerful instant, it felt like the stage and the crowd were on the same side. Martha didn't smile or cry. She just nodded, whispered a simple thank you, and stepped back. But her courage, her honesty, and her quiet strength had already changed the atmosphere of that entire rally. Everyone there knew they had witnessed something rare, a moment of truth that would be remembered long after the speeches were over. After the rally, videos of Martha's words spread like wildfire. Within hours, clips of the farmer's wife standing before President Donald Trump were all over the internet. On television screens, in news feeds, and across social media platforms, millions of people watched that quiet, humble woman speak truth to power. The video showed no theatrics, no grand gestures, Just Martha's trembling hands, her steady voice, and her heartfelt honesty. News anchors replayed her speech again and again, calling it one of the most powerful unscripted moments at a political event in years. Social media lit up with discussions. Some called her brave, praising her courage to speak from the heart in front of thousands. Others called her naive, questioning if anything would really change. But one thing was certain. Her words had cut through the noise like a blade through fog. Weeks later, when the cameras had moved on and the spotlight had dimmed, reporters drove down a dirt road in Iowa to find her. They found Martha right where she had always been, on the farm. She was gathering eggs from the chicken coop, her boots caked with mud, her hair tied back with a simple bandana. To them, it seemed almost surreal that this soft-spoken woman had become a national symbol of courage. When a journalist asked if she regretted speaking up, Martha simply smiled, her eyes gentle but firm. "No," she said quietly. "I just said what needed to be said. Someone had to." Her story began to ripple outward, far beyond Iowa. Teachers started sharing her speech in classrooms as an example of ordinary courage. Nurses wrote online about their struggles and thanked her for inspiring them to speak up. Truck drivers, factory workers, and small business owners posted messages saying they finally felt seen, because Martha had reminded them that their voices mattered. In a world full of shouting and division, one woman's calm truth had united people, if only for a moment, and on a quiet night. After the reporters were gone and her family had gone to sleep, Martha stood on her porch. She looked out over the moonlit fields, the same fields she had spoken for him, and whispered to herself, "Maybe things can change, if we're brave enough to speak." That night at the rally would never be forgotten, not for the banners, not for the chants, not even for the president's words. It would be remembered for one woman's courage to speak from the heart. A farmer's wife, not a politician, not a celebrity, had silenced a crowd not with anger but with truth.